First off, Ryan, there's just an amazing level of editing prowess for this film. How do you? I mean, the idea is to compose a shot, but this film is just really on another level. Just on that, how did you actually frame it? Can you just talk to our listeners about just your whole editing aesthetic behind this film because it's very elevated, in my opinion.
Yeah,
So.
well, I think I mean, it's hard. It's a chamber drama, and I don't have that many characters. In my first film, I had the same kind of thing, but I kind of really had an old-fashioned kind of compose my shots, kind of like 1950s. And I just wanted to try something completely different. And I shot with two cameras, and so that allowed for the dialogue. And I think I just wanted to not replicate TikTok, but I think in this modern era of like how MTV changed everything in the 80s and how editing was, I wanted to I really wanted to make a movie for the younger audiences could relate to. I feel like they've kind of like moved out of cinema. And so it was a balance of trying to both kind of stay traditional, a lot of my cinema grammar that I love, but at the same time kind of push it forward. So I was kind of trying to reach forward and backwards in time. And the movie's about time, and I think also it was great because the themes of the movie were about kind of showing juxtapositions of things and how everything's kind of happening. It's like that movie Everything All at Once, whatever that just came out. And so I think a lot of those ideas of things happening at the timeline was a lot of kind of how we wanted to approach this kind of perspective of kind of quantum physics is this idea of everything's infinitely fractal. And so I think the editing kind of came out of that, those kind of these broad ideas, and then trying to show quantum physics and this kind of idea of depending on which prism you're looking through, you see different things. I think that's kind of how we went about kind of pushing the editing forward.
From your vantage point, why is Cinequest just a perfect place as far as releasing your film as far as a world premiere? What do you like about that space and just that community that will see your film?
Yeah, I'm excited because I just think that San Jose is great because it's about, the tech community in San Jose and Stanford and all of the things around that is so interesting to me. And I just think that that community will embrace that a little bit more as opposed to more traditional film festivals. So I'm excited about that. And I'm also excited about VR and kind of, and there's, Neil Blomkamp made a movie last year called Demonic, and he used the software of Unity of motion capture stuff. And my next film, I really want to kind of play with that as well. I have these kind of not animated sequences, but semi, and I was originally going to have them just be animated. But after seeing that movie, I'm like, oh, I can kind of do it this way. So I think being able to be at Cinequest to meet contacts and things there, and knowing that that's kind of where gaming and cinema is going to kind of collide. This year Elder Scrolls came out, a video game, and it was like tied to the guy who wrote Game of Thrones. And I think you'll start to see video like one day you'll see a Quentin Tarantino, directing a segment of this cinema cutscene, or kind of this like those mixed things. I think that's where the kind of the future is going. It's like before Scorsese would never direct a pilot episode of something, Fincher wouldn't, but now you'd say in 10 years, a famous director might be directing cutscenes of video games, and I'm sure they'll want to combine those brands to bring the marketing aspects in. So I think that's a cool thing.
That's so awesome. So watching your film, I'm going through a lot of emotions. I'm thinking it's a sci-fi film, but it feels like a John Cassavetes film, but then it has the sort of the wonderful style and emotion and resonance of a Nicolas Roeg film. There's some Christopher Nolan elements, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering if any of these filmmakers that I
Wow.
mentioned just really influenced you because it seems there's so many things going on in your film in a good way. And I was
Yeah.
just yeah, so anyways, just
That's amazing. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, I mean, Nicholas Rowe has been a huge influence on me. My first film, his son Max was in my film. His mom is Teresa Russell, and there is the movie Bad Timing. And my first movie was a lot to do with bad timing. So I think I kind of in my first film, I think that I was kind of still borrowing from my influences instead of making them mine. And I think this time I kind of like let them go. But like John Cassavetes is all the same type of thing with my first film. And I think, yeah, I think all of those filmmakers you mentioned were a huge influence on me. And but this time I kind of trusted myself. And so it's every time you make a movie, you don't know what you're doing until you make a movie. And every time you kind of go back to the well, you kind of get better at doing what you're doing and you start to become yourself and find your voice. So all of those filmmakers definitely like really influenced me. But I feel like this time I kind of put them together in a way that recombine them in a cool new way that I think people will will be excited about if they know cinema. So you're one of the first people that noticed all those influences. So I appreciate that.
This is just an out there question, but I think you have, just from watching your film, you have the skill to actually, if you want to set up shop at some kind of production office or studio here in Los
Yeah.
Angeles. And I'm not knocking LA because I love LA, but the
Yeah.
idea that the fact that you can actually live in Portugal and then do LA, maybe one weekend you're in New York or Chicago, being an international filmmaker, has that been part of your aesthetic, or am I overthinking things regarding expanding your visual language, knowing different cultures, and then
Yeah.
realizing that can add to what you want to do as a filmmaker?
Yeah, well, I went to NYU, and I think, yeah, I think I was in LA for so long that I was kind of not getting stifled, but everything in LA just feels very. I mean, I love cinema, I love TVs, I keep up with everything, but I just it gets even to the point where even this summer, where I'm trying to keep up with the shows, and I just even if it's a show that blows you away, it's still kind of even like the show Blackbird, I loved it, but it still kind of feels like pat. And I think I was really trying to make. I think people are searching for novelty right now, and we have so much content. And I really wanted to like go swing for the fences of you really didn't know where my movie was going to go. And so, regardless of what you saw this year, even if it's like the going to win the Oscar, if you see my film too, my film might stick in your head a little bit better simply because it is so novel. I was thinking about it the other day. I'm really trying to make art and films that remind audiences how smart they really are. And, and I think that like for like my movie, even though it's very heady film and very philosophical, I think I really kind of went back to the well about like love stories. And I think that I wrote this thing down that yeah, Hollywood, a lot of times, I don't see many movies about love. I see a lot of movies about falling in love or about romantic and sexual attraction, but I don't see movies about love anymore. And love is kind of the hard conversations you have with people when like you don't know if you want to be with them anymore. And so I think that's the Cassavetes kind of thing that you were talking about. And so I think that that's kind of what I wanted to do with this and kind of like what I'm trying to do. And I think it's a much more European type of cinema. And so I think I came here because I just to have being in Europe and be surrounded by that a little bit more inspires me more to kind of keep going. Whereas in LA, it's been hard to try to pushing this movie out there, getting people to watch it and to understand it because just yeah, LA right now is very much about figuring out what's going on with streaming and kind of finding the right content. And so it's not a place to shepherd a filmmaker like myself right now, but doesn't mean I'm going to keep quit or I'm going to keep trying.
Hate to bite the hand that tries to
Yeah,
feed us, but it seems like when people say content, I think of monetization of products.
yeah,
It feels.
of course.
Yeah, but I'm glad this movie exists, and we're going back to Rogue. I mean, for him to cast people like Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland, or with Bad Timing, you have Garfunkel, Keitel, and Teresa Russell. You have to have actors who are lockstep with a filmmaker and are actually going to go there. And how
Yeah.
did you know your two leads would actually go there? And actually, you said you wanted to actually not be just craftspeople working on a movie about something, but they actually have to be really lockstep and just
Yeah.
go over the boundaries in a good way, I think, creatively.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got lucky with Brandon because we had another actor, and that actor, when we got closer to shooting, had a third child and kind of bowed out like 2 weeks before. And then I was put a lot of people in front of me quickly, and I was like, kind of in pre-production. And everybody was trying to, again, in the Hollywood way, try to sell the actor they thought was most marketable. But I was like, but at the end of the day, if the movie doesn't work, who cares if he's more marketable? And so to me, I went with the authentic choice, even against people's wishes. Um, it's amazing because Brandon's now, I mean, I can't say which show he's about. He just got booked on, but it's a pretty big show with Taylor Sheridan. And so, it went from him being kind of this like no name guy to like, next year or two, we'll kind of hear more from him. But I think, yeah, I just kind of, I had seen Tanya's work on Goliath, and she came in and she read for me, and someone of her caliber would never have come in and read for a director. And so, especially for like a small budget film like this. So I just kind of like trusted my instincts with her and him. And then I shot two camera the whole movie. So my thing is okay, how we did it was even if they didn't really understand the dialogue because it was kind of heady, I would let them kind of rewrite the scene the morning of with my editors on set with me. And so he would rewrite it with them, knowing what I kind of wanted. I would be working with the crew, and then I would get the new pages. And then I would sometimes not even know what the scene that they were doing. I would be learning the scene, and they would just go, and then they would kind of do my scene first, and then it would be like, but there would be like 10, 15 minute takes. and they were really in it. Obviously, sometimes it went really off of the wall from where I wanted the story to go, and would be kind of hard to tell the story because it was away from the plot. But then in the editing room, Matt and I knew we could go back to what we wanted, so it was like it wasn't. I think that a director's kind of sometimes gets so worried the actors improvising is going to ruin the movie, but the director's job in the editing room is to bring it back. So as long as we had them doing what we wanted, letting them roll with it, there's like little moments that I think were the moments of chemistry between them weren't in the scene originally, but we could re-edit those things back in. So it kind of was a really interesting experience.
I'm picturing someone like you who's grew up a cinephile and you really want to push the boundaries and the language of cinema. That maybe, do you think from your vantage point that one of the keys to becoming a really successful filmmaker is the idea of staying in an edit with your editor or by yourself in your thoughts, hours on end, alone or something, because it seems like with something as sophisticated as this film, you need to spend hours upon days upon months just
Yeah.
obsessing over the film. And then you have to be okay with being alone and sometimes being shut out from maybe the light outside or something like that. Is that
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, I think that my first movie, it was just weird, just kind of circumstances of how we didn't shoot everything all at once because it was cold outside, and so we had to wait for a couple of months. So it was just I learned through just no fault of my own this kind of like slower process, and so I think I just kind of carry that into this movie. And yeah, my process is look, Mike Nichols took him a year to edit The Graduate. And so, that was how they edited it back then. And I think Bob Fosse the same. I think, Bob Fosse, when he did All That Jazz, was another big influence on this film, actually, interestingly enough. The movie Altered States. And it's funny because Bob Fosse and Paddy Chayefsky, those two movies they wrote them at the same time. So those were both influences. But yeah, they edited for a year. And so I think me knowing that those things take time and my movies are so complex and my puzzle pieces when I get them are so complex. Sometimes it's hard to figure out how to tell the most economical story. And I'm really lucky that my editor is not a cinephile at all and does not care. And he's the complete
Whoa,
opposite of me.
I
So
would
it's like
never
really
think
cool.
that. I would never,
Yeah,
that is weird.
I know it's awesome, and it's like great because he's he's become like my work wife. But it's awesome because he knows how complex I am, but he's not precious about my ideas. So I always say to him, how do we make this as palatable for a child as possible? Because I know I'm so heavy. So he's really great because he's that counterbalance of like, okay, he's from Indiana. How could my mom from Indiana watch this? And so we always try to go back to, at the end of the day, this is for the audience. It's not about for the filmmaker. And so we always try to, as crazy as we go, think about the end user and their experience.
Ryan, my final question is a two-part heady question for you to answer.
Cool.
First off, and then I apologize for the first question.
Yeah.
What can you, right off the top of your head, can you name one of your all-time favorite movies, and what is it about this film that continues to resonate with you today? And the second part of my question, since this person was brought up in your film, what is your
Yeah.
favorite Brian De Palma film and why?
Yeah.
Because that's my favorite
Yeah.
director. So sorry.
Yeah. Oh, so funny. I mean, I would probably say my favorite Brian De Palma movie. Huh. That's a good question. Maybe Hi Mom.
That's how did I know you'd answer that? That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, De Niro is like one of the first. It's funny, he found De Niro. And also the scrolling thing on Star Wars, that was Brian De Palma's idea. That scrolling
Oh,
text in the beginning, because
yeah.
Brian De Palma hated Star Wars, but they all hung out together. And his idea for that scrolling text in the beginning was actually a Brian De Palma idea. In terms of one of my favorite movies and how I would probably say, and it really affected this movie, is two movies. Is Vanilla Sky and the original Abres los Ojos. So I think those two films very much influenced me as when they came out, and I think that a lot of my work centers around kind of those themes, and I think that obviously plays into this movie too. So
Cool. Ryan, thank you so much for
yeah,
your time. I
yeah,
really appreciated it. I really enjoyed your film
yeah,
as well. So
yeah.
very
Thank you.
sophisticated stuff and
Yeah,
really ballsy
yeah,
storytelling as well. So
yeah. Thank you.
sure. Okay.
Appreciate it.